Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to Umlink Energy Speaks Back, powered by Hark. Merry Christmas to everybody who's listening to this podcast today. My name is Paul Webb. I'm the founder of B2B Energy, and I'm your host. And weekly, I present to you experts from around the world. And today we are in the US and Canada all at one time, discussing with key energy influencers in their field, the energy transition. Our purpose, as always, is to provide a good understanding of energy management knowledge from around the world, which is available today for us to deliver savings that impact on our planet. So before I get into today's interviews, I would like to recognize our sponsors. They are Umlink, who are taking the confusion out of energy management, Clean Energy Revolution for their knowledge and their networking in the renewable world, B2B Energy for their 11-week energy program and managing organizations' third largest expense, Hark Systems, renowned for their energy software, Alexis Energy for their power management systems, led by Vision, who are an LED and a controls company, Watts, based in the US, for their electronics and EV transition, and Carbon Black Global for their waste to energy initiatives. And lastly, our certificate partners, Esther Energy. So welcome to our Christmas special and episode 62 of Umlink Energy Speaks Back, powered by Hark. Our special guests today have their own valuable insights into their transition into the renewable world. Today have all witnessed some form of energy transition, and they have their own stories to tell. So without any further ado, I give you our Christmas special of 2021. Good evening and good afternoon, everyone in the room today. And we've got something very interesting to discuss. We've got a cross between Canada and the USA, and we're actually going to talk about transition of the fossil fuels into the new renewable world. And we've got some really experienced people in the room today to discuss that concept and what's happening in today's world. So I'm going to start with Russ Bates, who's in the room with us today. So Russ, can you give us some background to yourself very quickly to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Paul. Russ Bates. I'm the founder of Next Gen Clean Energy Solutions. We help businesses, communities, municipalities, other organizations with clean energy and transitioning into sustainability. So we're kind of like their chief sustainability officer and concept to completion. Background in coal-fired power generation. Grew up around it, lived it, had a great life doing that, and have since transitioned into the clean energy sector.
Thanks, Russ. And then we have Brian from Canada.
Sorry, my name is Brian Scott. I'm the president of Solar Dev in Calgary, Alberta. We're a commercial solar developer, as well as energy efficiency upgrades and things like that for clients. Primarily commercially, don't really work in anything outside of that realm. I worked in the oil and gas industry for a number of years in manufacturing, product development, stuff like that. Modular buildings, stuff like that for the oil sands, but have since, over the years, moved from oil and gas to electrical contracting, and then now for the past several years into solar developments.
Okay, thank you, Brian. And then Gilbert.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for having me. I'm Gilbert Michaud. I'm an assistant professor of energy and environmental policy at the new school, actually, of environmental sustainability at Loyola University Chicago, here in Chicago, Illinois. My background is in economics and public policy, so I'm studying policy mechanisms related to wind and solar and the renewable energy transition. Do a lot of applied and engaged work with utilities, with nonprofits, state and local government folks, and doing policy studies, economic and workforce analysis type studies as well. So nice to be here.
Thank you, Gilbert. It's great to see you. And then we go over to David, also in America.
Thank you for having me. My name is David Bush. I'm an IBEW electrician. I'm from IBEW 573 in Warren, Ohio. Currently, I am the Renewables Project Manager for Davis Pickering. I started out my career as an electrician working gas and oil and working in a lot of the automotive plants. And within the past 2 to 3 years, I've heavily transitioned to the renewable section. And right now, my company is working several solar projects, and we're looking into the battery storage projects and other items such as that.
Well, look, great for you guys to join me today. And, you've all mentioned that word transition. Okay. So we hear that on a regular basis. Brian and I, when we're working our time on LinkedIn, and we're posting stuff and talking about the future and what we're trying to do to sort of beat the climate change or the climate crisis that's around us. The word transition comes into that, and we've all made transitions. I personally, many years ago, I was in the nuclear industry, and I've transitioned many times from energy management to controls back to energy management. Now, for me, I know how that's impacted on my life, but I've seen gradual changes. But now we're seeing that accelerate through the industry now. And I'd like to talk about how it's been, in fact, impacting on us as individuals. So, Russ, I'm going to come to you first. We're going to go around this same routine as such, but how's it impacted on your life, this transition?
It's been a pretty significant impact. I went from working with a company that was built on working in coal-fired power plants and seeing that steady decline from record multi-million-dollar revenue years in the late 2000s to struggling to get 50 million as late as last year. So I saw that coming and decided, all right, I'm going to have to do something. I see this is happening, and pushed until, all right, I'm going to go ahead and start my own company and do this because I see what's happening here and it makes sense. And working in renewables the last few years, it's a great industry to be in. And the transition for me, I haven't worked with my tools in a long time. But if somebody like me can transition into it, I know there's way more skilled folks that can do this. So me as an individual, I would say it's been a great impact. And if I was working with my tools, I'm not getting dirty the way I used to working on these types of jobs. It really is clean energy. So it's been a very positive impact, and it's been a fun journey thus far.
Were you nervous when you knew you had to take that step?
Yeah, with starting a business, sure. Yeah, I was
well, that's a different thing, isn't it? Starting a business.
Yeah,
is different,
I was definitely scared to death. But to go into clean energy, no, I wasn't nervous at all about it. 10 years ago, when I didn't really understand clean energy and renewables, sure, I'd be pretty nervous. But doing the research, talking to people, like you and Brian over the past several months, no, I certainly wouldn't be scared. I think you have to educate yourself on it and understand what's truth that's put out there and what's a myth. And there's still a lot of myths, and I understand why there's a lot of myths. Things that were said 10 years ago about renewables, it's not true today. So the technology has advanced so much, and I've talked to clients where, yeah, we talked about doing solar, 8-10 years ago and decided it wasn't going to work. Yeah, 8 or 10 years ago, it probably didn't make sense, but now it does, as an example. So, yeah, it's been a great transition for me, and something I definitely would do again. Certainly was not scared to do that.
We've seen the economics actually support going down the renewable route, haven't we? With the energy crisis, even currently, we've seen that making a big impact. So, what about yourself, yes, Brian? Is that you got the same stories? Yours slightly different?
It's a little different in that I had about 5 years of running an electrical contracting business between oil and gas and getting into renewables. When I was kind of winding up my oil and gas career, there were still jobs, but it was very obvious in my part of the world in Alberta, Canada, that it was changing, and a lot of people were just kind of assuming it was the next bust and then there'd be a boom. But it just seemed very obvious to me, like with renewables or not, that the world was changing quickly. Even the price of oil was strongly devalued, and I live in a place that's quite expensive to produce oil. So when I left oil and gas, it was a decision I made because I just couldn't see long term, and I didn't want to panic out at this age, where I was rushing to something else. But a few years ago, when I transitioned directly into renewables, it was exciting. It was something that, I kind of stumbled upon. We were being asked to contract for a solar developer, and I was learning more and more about it. And I just got really excited about it. And the more I understood about it, you kind of have that moment where you're thinking, everything I've been told about how this just doesn't make sense is wrong, right? And you start to see this pattern that it's just going to get better and it's just going to make more sense. And it becomes very obvious that, it did for me, at least at that time, that I needed to do that now. And I'm very glad I did. That, I see our company's future is very bright, and I see our province is kind of slowly coming around to the idea. And I think they'll have to keep things rolling. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for everyone out there in the industry.
Would you say you got that light bulb moment? Is that what you felt you had?
Absolutely. I was at a point in my life where I was trying to figure out what direction I wanted to move in. And I was just thinking about it a lot. And then just suddenly it seemed like the only way.
Just talking to both of you, in the back of my mind, it's that thing of not no choice, but it's that thing of, well, we've got no choice to go down that route, but it's the obvious route that's opening up in front of you, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think when you look with what's going on in the world today, whether people want to believe in what's happening, being climate change, human-caused climate change or not, it's the economics have changed. The world is moving in that direction. So it really doesn't matter for regions like mine in Western Canada, where certain governments or people might not want to, believe in the environmental issues. You're going to get left behind if you don't partake in it, right? So the economic argument isn't there anymore. You need to take part in it. You can't be a follower. You need to try and be a leader as much as possible. For governments and municipal and provincial and state and federal, everybody needs to take part and make their impact. But it seems very obvious to more and more people that we have this issue with climate change. We see weather disasters that seem like every month now in North America.
Especially the weekend. Significant.
Exactly. Yeah. Terrible.
Gilbert, you've been nodding all the way through both Russ and Brian's comments. Dare I say, has it been the same for you, or have you got a different story?
There's certainly overlaps. I think my story is a bit different in terms of my career pathway. It's been more of a research and academic path, of course. Mm-hmm. And so my first job, Paul, out of my undergraduate studies, I went to school for mathematics and economics. Got a job at a large business journal. And so my job was to talk to folks like you all, interview CEOs, talk to utilities and emerging energy companies. And this was about 10 years ago. And we were starting to see this transition happen. But it was, compared to now anyway, much more infant. It was about keeping the lights on for folks. Solar was $8 per watt. Now it's $2 or $3 a watt. Costs have gone down over time. So we started to see sort of, when I was talking to folks at this business journal, projects that were emerging that were really cool and innovative at the time. And now they're just very commonplace. Everyone is doing wind. Everyone is doing solar. And it was so exciting to me that, it eventually sort of pushed me to actually quit the job, go to graduate school. I ended up getting a PhD and wanted to do this applied and engaged research on these topics and teach classes and influence students in that way, but also work with practitioners and work with all of these types of companies and try to answer some of these difficult to answer research questions about what should we be doing with regard to policy? How do workforce transitions work and happen when we're talking about fossil fuels to clean energy? And all this kind of fun research-oriented solutions to these discussions. So that's sort of my story. And it's definitely changed over time with familiarity, with education, with cost declines, and with more supportive policy mechanisms, frankly, across the world for clean energy.
In the academic world, are we seeing a lot of transition in the academic world as well as in the real world?
Absolutely. So there's been a lot of economists and policy scholars such as myself that have inherently sort of been nudged toward clean energy. This is the wave that's happening right now. We need to understand what these transitions mean. There's a lot of dollars flowing from foundations and the federal government for research in this realm. And there's one of the emerging things which is really cool in the academic world is this concept of energy democracy. It seems like everyone is studying energy democracy. How can communities and nonprofits and sort of grassroots bottom-up development happen independent of big utilities or policy barriers? So that's been a big emerging angle in the academic world just over the past 5 years or so.
And David, I think your story is going to be similar to Russ's, isn't it?
It is. Mine's a little bit more I'm more of the wrench turner. I mean, I was the guy in the field, like in the oil fields. I was doing the compressor stations, wiring up the lighting for that. But yes, I did a lot of training. I believe it was about 8 years ago, almost on a whim. It was solar and wind turbine training, and I almost took it as a novelty. I mean, back then, in our area, there was no solar work, no wind work. And so I just took it on a lark, pretty much. Just might as well, a little education never hurt. And then a few years down the road, I was working with Russ at the time, and I got the opportunity to go do a wind turbine in Illinois at a wind farm. And that's when I guess the renewable bug really hit me, was I was kind of realizing that with all the uncertainty through the world, no matter what your political beliefs are, being energy independent and not relying on any other nation or any other company to provide our own energy, it just makes sense. It's common sense to me. But I've really been into it. Now that I'm pushing projects, I'm actually starting to see that we're at the beginning of the long roller coaster of the solar revolution. And I'd rather be in the front of the roller coaster than the back.
Yes, but I don't like it when it goes up and down.
Well,
can you describe it as something different?
Well, that's the thing is back in the late 1800s, there were horse buggy makers and the whip makers. I mean, and there was a revolution, and I'm sure solar and renewables, there's going to be more additional technology. Yeah. It's not going to stop at solar. It's not going to stop at wind. There's going to be more. But right now we're on the cusp and the cutting edge of this being the heyday of this version of renewables. So I want to embrace it. And I don't ever, me personally, I don't see a day where we don't use petroleum projects or products at all. I mean, realistically, I think we got to transition from one to the other, but I don't think we're going to completely eliminate it, at least not in my lifetime.
No, I totally agree with you there, because I get mullered when I start talking about nuclear still having its place regarding, we need that base load. We need a base load, whether it's going to be fossil fuels or whatever. We need, obviously, because, sun and wind, if we just said those two, they rely on weather conditions, the sun, the wind, and we need, when we haven't got those areas, we need a substitute in there to support it. Like we need offsetting. Again, I don't believe in offsetting, but we're going to need to do offsetting. We need to plant more trees, etc. They all have a place, and with what proportion that is, I don't know. No one knows at this stage. And I'm glad you mentioned the roller coaster, because the ups and downs, for me, visualizing that, the ups and downs, leads me to my next thoughts, really. And the next question on our list is the challenges. So what challenges do you think? For me, I know what one challenge is, but I'm not going to sort of air that at the moment. But let's go around the room again and let's talk about the challenges that we've got coming up and what we've got today. Russ, lead the way on our challenges.
I'd say for me, in my experience, the biggest challenges I see is on the education front, or maybe it's the re-education. What we knew 10 years ago with a 125 watt solar panel or whatever, 150 watt, is much different than the 480s that are out there today, and we'll be in the 500s. And what are we going to get into? I don't know how much more they can squeeze out of that. But I just think it's the education standpoint. When I speak with people, with clients, just people on the street, they have a perception, whether it's, yeah, it's good, but it's just to help the environment, or no, it's bad and it's going to take away from this part of the economy. I see it intersecting. I've said this many times, whether it's sustainability to help the environment or the economic impact, it still comes to clean energy. I mean, it just makes sense now. The economics are there, where before they weren't as much, and each year it gets a little bit better. So I think the education is a big part of it, Paul, that I've seen as a challenge.
And I think you're right there, because it's not just in the renewables, it's in climate change. We need to be educating people about the climate change situation as well, and cutting out all the different conspiracies and focusing on the facts. But it doesn't help to not have that education to help people make the right decisions regarding that. Brian, is there challenges in your world at the moment?
Definitely. Education is always going to be a big part of it in any oil economy like that I live in. That's always going to be a big part of it. There's always going to be a lot of disinformation. There's going to be a lot of folks that have made their living since they were 20 years old, going towards retirement off of fossil fuels, and they don't really want to even know that there's another answer, really. So education is always going to be a big part of it. But when you get a little bit further north, like we are, seasonal storage is always going to be a big, important technology to get past. While we're definitely seeing battery prices throughout this decade drop, that seems to be a fair forecast. Getting into longer term seasonal storage is going to be a big challenge for us, just due to production in the winter. When we hit cold pockets, our wind drops off pretty hard, as well as, of course, in December, our solar production is a fraction of what it is in July. So there's definitely those challenges to get past, and they're going to take a long time.
And what about in the academic world, Gilbert? Is there challenges there? We're talking education again.
Yeah, I'd echo the education sentiment. I think the biggest two that I see are, from a policy perspective, money, lobbying, role of big electric utilities as a barrier in many geographies, and I think workforce. So those are the two that I would identify as the biggest challenges. So when we think about the political system, especially here in the States, right, we have these large investor-owned utilities that have been around for about 100 years at this point. They were set up to provide electricity to, and they have been largely sort of monopolistic organizations over the decades, right? And so it's a different discussion if we're talking about utility scale wind and solar projects, but if we're thinking about distributed, smaller scale rooftop projects on homes or small businesses, it's sort of a threat to their corporate profits. And they'll cite things like grid complications and those, reverse Robin Hood net metering type policies, which are really interesting. But I think it's about losing control over that market and sort of a threat to profits. And so they are the largest campaign contributors in many states across the country, and have really pushed back against policies to encourage distributed generation. And then secondly, from a workforce perspective, we've done a lot of modeling trying to understand the role of, let's say, displaced fossil fuel economy workers or any sort of declining occupations in a geography, and if they have the knowledge, skills, abilities, education levels, et cetera, to perhaps plug into clean energy jobs that are emerging. And this has been a really important thing that we need to understand. And what we've observed from a lot of that research is there are opportunities for this transition. It's harder than it sounds in practice, or in theory rather. And there's significant wage and education gaps that we're seeing. So maybe you can transition in a very easy way to a clean energy occupation, but maybe you were getting some sort of wage premium for working in coal mining industry. And so maybe you are going to take a pay cut if you transition to a solar installer. Or conversely, if you want to maintain those same wage rates that you've been making over the past, let's say, 10 or 20 years, you might need some upskilling. You might need to get a certification or go back to getting a project management certificate or become an electrical engineer at a local community college and those types of things. So there's sometimes educational and wage gaps with those workforce transitions.
Is the general pay structure for fossil fuel higher than renewables, or is it balanced?
I welcome comments from the other panelists, but the work that we've done specific to Ohio.
So Gilbert doesn't want to commit to that one, no?
The work that we've done specific to Ohio is largely circumstantial based off of the type of occupation, right? I think for building out, so we're talking about construction phase type occupations, building a wind farm or building a solar farm, a lot of the wages are less. We're talking about operations phase where we have folks monitoring performance and a lot of engineers and more technical jobs. A lot of those are graduate level jobs that pay higher. So it depends on where you plug into the industry, I guess.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you for that. And then, so David, where do you think your challenges are?
I'm probably going to come across as a little bit more mercenary, but yeah, it's definitely the economic viability for the average person, because many people can't afford the initial startup to do a home solar panel system. They can't afford a Tesla Powerwall or other things like that. So there needs to be some incentive. I know if you play the long game, there's an incentive, but the initial startup cost just makes the decision for a lot of families not to be able to do this.
And then are we seeing, like we have done with all energy management or sort of renewable technology, where we've got really high prices in the beginning and they start to come down, and then we upgrade them and they go up, then eventually they start to plateau? Are we seeing that?
I think we're to the stage right now where it's starting to lower to the plateau. The plateau's on the horizon, but with the development, and especially nowadays with the supply chain issues, every piece of equipment we have is at a premium, and it has to be ordered 6 months in advance in order for it to come up 2 months later. But I definitely see that as one of our huge issues. And in response to the professor, we have the wages in the field for people with degrees. They're pretty much across the board the same, at least from what I understand. But coming from somebody who worked North Dakota on the back end oil fields, I make significantly less installing solar panels and the racking and doing the wiring for that. It definitely does pay more to be in the fossil fuel industry, personally, at least.
Look, Guy, I'm on your side. Okay, so I'm English, but I don't know how to play baseball. But I'm going to throw a curveball in. Is that the right thing to be saying here? Let's talk about sustainability. Okay, I see this on a regular basis where people are saying that solar isn't sustainable regarding how we manufacture it, and what we're going to do when it then becomes end of life. How are we going to address? I think that's a challenge, personally, and that's the challenge I want to bring into this forum today. Who can volunteer an answer for that for me?
I'll throw something out there, Paul. When we're talking about like solar panels in general, and what do we do with the end of life of those? I know they're starting to recycle them. I think we've both got connections, and I think Brian, you do as well, with a company that does recycling. And forgive me, I can't remember the name. I think that's fantastic. I think that's a big thing for the industry. I know wind turbine blades are, what are we going to do with those? Do we shoot them off into space, or do we bury them? There's some technology I'm understanding, believe it or not, from GE, where you're going to be able to reuse those for something else. I see people getting creative, putting these things as part of bridges and stuff like that, with these big solar or big wind turbine blades. So I think there is something. I think we're going to have some of these that we're not going to be able to do anything with. We're not going to be able to recycle them. But I'm optimistic that we are going to be able to, make that an entire circular economy with those technologies.
I think the answer there, Russ, is we can't do anything with them today, but tomorrow there will be something. we've always got something that we can address those. There's always a solution. And the difference that with today, I think, we had the Industrial Revolution. We did not think about the Industrial Revolution, about what the impact of the environment was going to be. But we're thinking about it today, what we're doing. And that's where I think the difference is. So there will be a solution, not today, but one day. We've got loads of experts around us that are focusing on the circular economy. When we had the Industrial Revolution, did we talk about the circular economy? No one even knew about that word. But today we've got that.
Agreed.
So let's look at so what are the biggest factors now that are supporting what we're doing regarding this transition? I'm going to come to you again, Russ, to lead the way on the supporting factors of this.
I would say just I think social media has done quite a bit to change public perspective, and again, I guess helping that education piece that I think is critical. I think that's a big support. Obviously, the technologies, the advancement there, the lowering of cost, which makes it so much more advantageous for companies, for organizations, whoever to jump in there. I think those are going our way. And, again, where 10 years ago, you were either on this side of the aisle or on the right side of the aisle saying, yeah, let's do it, or no, let's not. Even the last president we had here in the States, they were already starting to make that transition. It's not like it stopped and all of a sudden this year it happened. It accelerated this year in the States, but I think that's just a sign of public opinion and what private public businesses are wanting to do, and people are starting to learn more about it. So I would say that's a big thing that's helping this transition for everyone.
Yeah, totally agree. Brian, would you think the support? I know you're going to say social media because you love social media.
I get it. I'm a loudmouth on social media. It's one of those things, to Russ's point, that getting everybody educated to understand what the possibilities are. I'm always amazed. Like I look at our sales process, and it starts with education with everybody. It doesn't matter who they are. They could be the most educated person out there, and you start having that conversation and you feel like you're going to have the exact same conversation every time, where you're starting at square one, where it's not, I don't want to say it's not publicly available knowledge, but it's not common knowledge. And I think it's important that schools are teaching it, that people become more aware of the kind of the simple principles of renewable energy. And like when we talk about a circular economy, I think getting to a point where we're building in full life cycle costs into products, whether they be solar panels or coffee cups, it's one of these things where we need to drastically reduce our energy consumption as well as part of this entire problem to get to where we need to get. And putting a price on things, I think, is the most effective way to do that, whether it's carbon taxes, full life cycle costs on everything. It incentivizes people to make the right decisions, and it incentivizes companies to build out products that can be used over and over and over again in an environmentally sustainable way.
And Gilbert, what's your thoughts on it regarding the academic side of it, regarding the supporting points?
I would point, Paul, to the role of local innovation as being really important to this process. So as a policy scholar, I'm studying what state and federal governments are doing to, again, continue to nudge forward renewable energy through these pretty traditional benefit streams that we've been talking about of economy and the environment, right? And what I found in my studies through interviews and statistical analyses and such is that you usually don't go from 0 to 100 in terms of we're going to pass some policy. It's a much more nuanced process where you have local co-ops, you have nonprofits that are setting up things like a carbon tax or a carbon fee program, or I've studied a lot of community renewables. So community solar projects that a developer or a nonprofit or a local school or a church or some sort of entity will set up in town or city of X. And folks have a little bit of proof of concept. They say, hey, look at what they did in this city. This is a really cool project. We helped support 50 or 100 local jobs. We mitigated X amount of greenhouse gases. and you start to raise sort of attention and awareness and education around these processes. And then you have local and sort of state or national elected officials that are saying, hey, look at these cool projects that they're building at this co-op in geography X. If we actually implement something more aggressive to nudge this type of development along, we'll have industry come here. We'll have projects happen here. We can realize a lot more of these economic and environmental benefits locally. So in many cases, the policy changes don't happen in state or federal capitals as you snap your fingers. They happen in this nuanced process over time where you start to see projects bubble up. And then a more stringent policy mechanism will be put into place to encourage these developments locally, which I think is a really exciting path forward.
And David, I'm really sorry that you're always last in the queue for sort of
That's fine.
Yeah, and you're not allowed to say all of the above. So go on,
well,
David.
Everybody keeps. I was going to say the exact same thing the professor said, but he stole it word for word. Actually, when it comes to me, I don't even know if this is a real term, but it seems to be increased generational awareness. I'm a child of the 80s. I mean, when I was growing up, we were afraid of holes in the ozone because people were using too much hairspray. Generations before us, they used DDT on farm fields for an insecticide. But now when you speak to these younger generations, and social media does play a huge aspect of it, it seems like everybody is more concerned about being a good steward for the planet. And I do believe that helped push us. Yes, it becoming more economically viable is a huge push, but just the fact that there's TikTok videos and everybody on Instagram is talking about all of these items, and all this younger generation, they're getting very excited about it, and they're the ones that are going to be voting for the policies. They're the ones that are going to be buying the EV cars. They're the ones that are going to be studying and researching the next generation of renewables. They're excited. They're pushing it. I think that's a huge contributing factor on why everything's accelerated in the past 10 to 15 years.
And I can say this. So all of the above, I think, are supporting. I'm personally seeing the social media in the last 2 years. It's exploded regarding the amount of people that are talking about the renewables. It may be because of my connections and what I'm doing personally. But I think one of my biggest factor, I agree with all of you guys, but one of my biggest factor, I think, is the students, the graduates that are coming through. I run the Clean Energy Revolution Juniors, which are a group of students that are coming through that have already sort of started to be educated regarding renewables and energy management. I can't believe the amount of talent that's coming through that I think is really going to drive this industry going forward. We've already got graduates there, and I can't believe the amount of PhDs I meet. And I'm not a PhD person, and I've gone through the ranks, and I'm an engineer, electrical electronics engineer. That's where I got to. But I'm seeing so many PhDs in this industry now, and I think that's really harnessing what we're doing as of today. We've got a lot of talent around us that are driving this forward, and I think they will drive it forward going into the future when, maybe we can stick our feet up and forget about the social media for a while. That'd be nice one day, Brian, wouldn't it? Not having to post for the day. So this is Energy Speaks Back. We're sponsored by the Clean Energy Revolution. We're also hosted and supported by Umlink, which is a new group we've set up regarding networking. My mission is to bring energy experts together around the world, holding hands. And I really appreciate your time today, from your side of the world, helping everyone to be educated. But, there's always one thing that Energy Speaks Back boasts itself. So I want to now put you all on the spot. I've thrown enough curveballs into this, today. And Russ knows where I'm going with this, and so does Brian. So is there anything you guys can give back to our industry today as a takeaway? We'll start with Russ. We give David some chance to think about an answer on this one, yeah?
I appreciate that.
I guess my takeaway, I've said education quite a bit, but I think it's really important for people to understand change is going to happen. And I'm speaking from transitioning from the fossil fuel industry to renewables. Change is going to happen, and you can either roll with it or push back. And I encourage everybody, just give it a shot. Don't be scared. Understand, again, educate yourself. But it's really a great field to be in. It's a very exciting time. There's definitely challenges, and to Gilbert's point earlier, there's a lot of challenges with workforce as far as shortages of skilled labor, and then the challenges of is the pay going to be what I need to make it, and this and that. So I really encourage everybody, just get into the field and see, because we need good people in this clean energy revolution that we're going through. And it's something to really feel good about. I'm get up every single day very excited about being able to talk with people and be guests on podcasts like this and learn more, because I learn something every day. So I would say, just don't be scared. Take a chance, look into it. There's a lot of great people out there that will help.
One of my favorite sayings is every day's a school day, Russ. And I think if you embrace that, then you can't go wrong. And you're doing some great stuff on the podcasting and really putting it out there. So well done to you, Russ, on that. And Brian, I come to you.
I'm going to echo that a little bit. I just think it takes a bit of an open mind. I don't think everybody is going to. It's going to be a challenge for some people if they're just looking to directly transfer to the clean energy job. It's going to be the exact same. You might not hit the same pay. You might not hit the same expectations. But keep an open mind. If you're looking, there's a lot of new jobs in sustainability as a whole. There's a lot of new companies in sustainability. Sometimes getting in on the ground floor for companies like that can change your life. I think it's one of those things when you really look out there. I know in where I live in Calgary, the amount of new sustainability companies starting every month, it seems. There's so many out there. And maybe it's not your direct background, but my background as an electrician and a project manager, I don't think of myself as just that, right? I think everybody has different skills that they can bring to the table and adapt and learn different things. And maybe you have to pick up a few different courses or something like that. But there's going to be gains as well as challenges to that. I know we were talking before, David had spoken to kind of some of the benefits of working in the oil field, and I know a lot of people that have made the majority of their living off of camp jobs, and those camp jobs pay extremely well. They're very difficult to get out of those jobs because you spend a lot of time on camp. You spend maybe half of your year living in a camp, but there's sacrifices and benefits to that when you come back to working maybe in more of a centralized location. Maybe you can spend more time with your family. It's a give and take, and nothing's perfect, but to Russ's point, going with the flow and finding where you fit within it is probably your best option.
Really great. And then Gilbert, from your sort of academic world, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd offer a couple things. One thing we haven't talked about too much today is sort of these concepts of access and equity and inclusion. These are hot topics right now, and deservedly so. One interesting thought that I've had is the social injustices we've seen in the criminal justice world, even with the pandemic and in healthcare. We're talking about equity and inclusion and marginalized populations and disadvantaged communities. And I think a lot of that is also snowballed into the energy and environmental world as well, which I think is promising. We think about sort of the early adopters of electric vehicles or of solar PV and these types of advanced and clean energy technologies. A lot of them are sort of historically more affluent folks. Maybe they have a higher appetite for these things. Maybe they just sort of have environmental altruism and we're going to do this anyway. And this next wave of adopters for these types of technologies are going to be more inherently risk averse or maybe lower income folks. And how can we also develop policy solutions, community solar, as I mentioned, ways that we can include renters and condo owners and folks that maybe want to buy one block of a solar project, but they can't install a full 10 kilowatt system on their roof, right? And so I think this is a really interesting and exciting path forward. And then the other thing I'd offer, Paul, real quick, is something I tell my students, frankly, teaching energy and environmental policy is to get involved, right? Talked about education a lot today. Learn about these issues, go to hearings, provide written testimony. If you're passionate about making positive change in the energy world, you can get directly involved in these issues and actually implement policy change at the state and local level. And that's a really powerful thing. So I would offer to folks to get involved, frankly.
Brilliant. Thank you, Gilbert. Appreciate that. And then David, is there anything you can give back to the industry?
I believe mainly, but I'd like to say is pretty much if you're watching this podcast, you're already showing an interest in this revolution. Keep on educating yourself on it. Talk about it. Normalize it. That's the thing, is we need to make these conversations become normal dinner table conversations, not something you just talk about when you're trying to make a point or to seem like you're more educated than the next person. We need to make these decisions and these conversations an everyday conversation, so that way everybody wants to be part of the solution. And that's pretty much one of the best ways we could push all these issues forward.
David, thank you very much. And look, thank you very much, everyone, for your contribution into today's podcast. I really appreciate your time and your effort into this. And, you're all doing a great job in your own sort of sphere of this transition. And thank you for sharing your experience regarding this and your thoughts on the challenges and your thoughts on the positive areas that are coming out from this time. So I'd like to say thank you and for your time. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much for having me.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Paul.
And you and your families, please be safe, specifically over Christmas. And please all have a nice Christmas, everyone.
Fantastic.
You too, and happy holidays.
You too, Paul.